Hey everybody, Juan here. Welcome back to the channel. I love the concept of collecting video games because in my case, it allows me to reconnect with beautiful times that I had growing up. Because even at the worst day that I had in my life, when I popped in that game on the PS1 or inserted the cartridge on an N64, the problems just melted away. And a video game genre or a specific variety of games on the N64 that I loved were wrestling games. So I proudly collect wrestling games for pretty much all the disc-based consoles and the N64. I don't really dabble too much into the NES and Super Nintendo games because honestly, I just didn't think they were all that great, but I wanted to talk about 3 specific games for the N64 that I feel like if you're a wrestling fan or you used to be a wrestling fan or you didn't quite get wrestling, but you had a wrestling fan friend, you probably played any of these at one point or another. People love WWF No Mercy because that's one of the best games of all time, but where most of that started was WCW NWO Revenge. Now, this is not the first game that had that engine. There was the previous WCW game for the N64 that was a modification of some Japanese games. It was able to portray the characters that we love to watch on screen, but put it in the game, and you had a massive roster. You had made-up characters like Aki-Man or AKI-Man. I actually thought that was a real person, but my favorite character to play as was probably Diamond Dallas Page because I was obsessed with the Diamond Cutter. Now, a couple of years ago, I actually did have a chance to meet Diamond Dallas Page. So to be able to play a video game that came out in the mid-90s, in 1996, but then many years after, being able to actually interview and get to know the professional wrestler, and I even do DDP yoga to this day, was really special. But I love the grappling mechanics and the animation. I feel like with the N64 generation, a lot of 3D games were still a little bit on the stiff side of the animations, but this game was so fluid, and the fact of the matter is that the characters look like the stars that you saw on television. And even though this was more of a bare bones experience in terms of like they're one of these outrageous match types, I really love playing this game. So that's definitely one game that I feel like everybody has to experience just to appreciate that when people say wrestling games are not the way they used to be. Okay, cool. So give me a frame of reference so I have a better idea of what they were like. And I feel like WCW NWO Revenge is an excellent example of that. Now, before we get to WWF No Mercy, we got to talk about WrestleMania 2000. When I was growing up, I watched mainly WCW because we did not have USA, we didn't have TNN, but I did have more access to TNT. Now this game, it pretty much has the same engine as WCW Revenge. I don't like the graphics in this one. I feel like the faces that they pasted on the 3D models are not exactly great. They're actually kind of ugly. But the game is definitely very fun, and I feel like it's slightly faster than NWO Revenge. It's got a couple more match types. It's got some creation tools, and this is where people started getting very creative with adding the stars that were not in the other games. WCW NWO Revenge didn't really have a lot of customization. You kind of got what was there, but because you had so many stars in the roster, I don't think anybody really had a problem with that. This was the first one that I got for the WWF games on the N64 because WWF No Mercy, at least here in Puerto Rico, it was still very expensive. Even going into the GameCube generation, it was still like $40 used, whereas WrestleMania 2000 dropped to about $15 to $20, so I bought this years after it came out, but before that, obviously, I rented this bad boy and No Mercy at Blockbuster. Without a shadow of a doubt, the last game that we have to talk about is WCW Backstage Assault. No, this is a bad game. Don't play it. I have this version, and I also own the version for the PlayStation 1 because I'm an idiot. But I do technically own it. But let's actually move on to the game that everybody cares about, everybody still talks about to this day. A game that came out, when did it come out? 2000. That is 19 years ago, people. Can we let that marinate for just a second? 19 years ago, Yet people still talk about WWF No Mercy. People love the combination of the match types. You have the ladder matches, you have a ton of backstage areas. In addition to that, you have a massive roster, and in addition to that, ladies and gentlemen, you have arguably one of the best story modes in pro wrestling games history. And it was because it was so open. For example, you had the APA, you could hire the Acolytes Protection Agency to protect you. You could do that. You had so many unlockables, from characters to moves to outfits. You talk about this and you just can't help but want to play this game. I actually really want to play this game right now. These are not the original boxes, the cardboard boxes. These are plastic boxes that I got at Custom Game Cases. Not a sponsor, by the way, just saying. But I bought these because I have many of the N64 wrestling games, but I got the boxes for these three because I believe this is the trilogy. This is the optimal trilogy for professional wrestling games on the Nintendo 64. So I would love to know, based on the console, is WWF No Mercy on the N64 your favorite wrestling game of all time? It is for me. Some of the characters that I love to use was Stone Cold Steve Austin. I love to stun the hell out of everybody. I love to update characters. Even to this day, when you talk about Nintendo 64 emulators with any of these games really, including Super Mario, etc., you could rip out the textures for these games and you can swap them out. So I guarantee you, with a little bit of a Google search, a little bit of the Google, you can find, wow, that was bad. You can find updated rosters for WWF No Mercy. Not just updated rosters, updated entrances, updated movesets. People have hacked the hell out of these games, but I feel like that lets you know how special most of these games, especially No Mercy, was to professional wrestling fans. I just wish the Titantrons were a little bit better. If you play these games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Before the days of GIF, so you had like it's like two animations, like you build a gun, just moved his butt, like the two cheeks were moving. You may have noticed something common throughout the video, which is that all three games have the same engine. They're made by the same company. Yeah, at one point they switched from WCW to WWF, but they're the same games. And yeah, I have played WWF Warzone, Attitude. I own those games and I played them extensively, but ultimately they were far too complicated for me. And those were the type of games that if you do go back to them and you forgot all the button combinations, it gets really frustrating. But all three games, I recorded all this footage and I had a blast going back and playing them, and I kind of want to stream and do some other stuff with these games down the line, so don't be afraid to comment away if you have any ideas related to wrestling games. If you enjoyed this video, consider following me on any of my social media, whether it be Instagram, Twitter. If there's anything specific from my video game collection, video game stories that you would like me to talk about, please let me know with a comment or a reply, because I love to be able to connect with all of you. So up until next time, thank you for watching and supporting, and take care, everybody.